hope everyone's been well in the 2 weeks since we last met. I apologize for having to cancel last week. There was a snafu in the schedule. That was my fault. It happens. Interesting. So we've got a good range of places across the country. Good, because I'm really curious to see. I keep hearing, I'm in Los Angeles, so I'm, well aware of what California is doing. But then I am always surprised. I keep hearing from people in other states and other areas who are going back to school full time or going back hybrid. So I'm always really curious to see kind of how it is across the country, and especially, and of course, we've got folks from Canada and New Zealand and other places visiting us as well. Yakima. Awesome. I lived in the Pacific Northwest for almost 10 years. All right, well, I'll just leave the poll up there for a few minutes. It's still early. Yeah, it's only 12:02, so I'm sure people will keep joining us. Interesting. So those of you that put other in the options, because I knew I wouldn't get them all, would you mind putting in the chat what it is that what the other is? I'm super curious. Yeah, and there's still some unknowns. Yeah, every day it seems like there's a little bit more, there's more, people are it's down to the wire, they have to decide, but I know from friends in other districts who've been posting, there's still a lot of unknown. Peggy, interesting. Okay, so all students will be virtual, but they're still figuring out staff. Yeah, you're right. I have heard of some districts asking staff to be in the building working, but kids at home. Okay. Katie, some of our kiddos are going every day, and some only part-time to being on. Oh, okay, so it's kind of split between ages. Yep, I've heard of that as well. Yep, staff every day. Huh. So one of the things I wanted to, in this kind of survey, I don't know how many of you saw, of course, the picture from that high school in Georgia. That kind of went viral, right? Where all the kids were jammed together in the hallway and most of them didn't have masks on. The student who posted that picture got suspended for 5 days because she broke school conduct code for her use of social media and taking pictures of minors without consent. And then the principal warned the rest of the students that if they on social media, they would also be suspended, which I found an interesting response to that. And she also, the student, I like this girl, she launched a poll, or she did a survey of all of her classes and put in the ratios of how many students were wearing masks compared to how many students were in the school. And it was like 5 out of 25, 7 out of 28, it was very low. It was an interesting story that I read this morning, and her parents are going to fight the suspension. But yeah. And then I think it was also in Georgia, 260 staff had to quarantine after the first day, staff and students, so it's as people make decisions, and I know in some states are starting back to school even in the beginning of August, we're beginning to see what the results of those decisions are. I don't know if any of you were able to attend Tuesday. We had a Better Normal led by C. White, who's another ACES Connection staff member, with Robin Kogan. She's a school nurse who writes a blog. She has a ton of followers. She was on CNN and in the New York Times recently talking about going back to school from a school nurse perspective. And she's going to be a guest on this program as well soon when we can figure out a Thursday that works for her. But I wanted to bring up some of the points that she made on Tuesday, which I thought were really, they really hit home for me. And I would love any of you that were there to to chime in, one of the first things she said was that it feels like we're making plans in sand. And I was like, what a perfect description, right? Like, as we start to try to make a decision, you know, everything's constantly shifting and you're trying to stay steady. I loved that quote. And just, you know, from a school nurse's perspective, that we have to consider safety first, that it can't be political, and that 60% of 57 million kids have either no school nurse or a part-time school nurse. That number is astounding. So 25% of schools have no school nurse, and then the rest are part-time. And I know that's true from LA, but I'm used to, you know, like LA has a lot of funding issues around support staff, but to hear those numbers nationwide and to think about, you know, her point was really, of course, we needed everyone to have a full-time school nurse before this. But if we're considering having people in buildings, and who takes care of them when people are sick? Like, if there is no school nurse or a school nurse 2 days a week, who is responsible for the human beings in that building in terms of keeping them well and taking their temperatures and, you know, helping the school follow guidance? And do these schools have, yeah, Janice, right? It's generally the office staff. And that was her point was, and she knows that, right? She said it's usually office staff and admin who are making these plans. Do they have a school nurse on their team? Do they have an epidemiologist on their team? Do they have science represented, you know, on their school plan teams? And you know, in her experience, often not, right? And that because we have no national leadership around this from the Department of Ed or other areas, that it's been pushed down to the local level, as we see, right? When I look at how much differentiation there is between decisions and how they're being made, that when they're pushed to the local level, it becomes more political, and it's not science informed by health experts then. And that was what her biggest concern was. And in fact, I read a story, I'm originally from Wisconsin, so I get lots of news from Wisconsin, and there was a story about a district in Wisconsin, I can't remember which one, that had decided to be virtual, and then due to public pressure are reversing that decision. You know, and that to me was a good example of like, you know, that they're, and these are human beings that I have much empathy for. I'm not saying that they're, you know, horrible, evil, like people who don't care, right? But they are under so much pressure to make the right decision and make everybody happy. And it's been kind of dizzying to watch these discussions play out, even on my personal Facebook page, from all the school folks that I know all over the country. And then another good point I think that Robin made, which really resonates with, you know, our trying to aim these discussions at being, you know, through a trauma-informed lens, that all of this grief and trauma that we are carrying with us, adults and kids, is going to come to school. There's no artificial divide. I mean, there never was, but now it's incredibly compounded. So, you know, she was really championing, you know, our collective efforts to address social emotional, you know, learning, not just social emotional learning, but an attention to the social emotional needs of students and adults, and make space for the grief conversations that need to happen. And I know we've talked about that here as well. So anyway, that has been what is on my mind for sure over the last 2 weeks since we last met. And I would love to hear, I mean, today I don't have there's no other guest, and this has been the topic that has has just, you know, not changed in terms of current events. And so I would love to hear from you today. Kind of, what are your needs? What do you need what questions might you have from the whole group? I'm going to put you into breakout sessions in a few minutes to talk in smaller groups, but is there anything that you'd like to ask the larger group? Put it in the chat or raise your hand, speak up. Anybody want to get on speaker? Janice, yeah, good point about funding. Yeah. So like, yeah, where's all the funding going to come from for all of the stuff that we need, right? Not just, I mean, obviously we need counselors and nurses to support what's coming to school, but we also need all of the gear and cleaning, all of these things that if we're actually going to be in the building. That's such a great point.
And I would like to ask people, I've been reading a lot, the past week or so about younger children under 10 from other countries as well, and how they're just not as likely to be infectious, and why, saying that the cells don't stick inside their lungs. So I'm curious to know, I know one person responded saying it depends on the grade, but I'd be curious to know, like, are some schools allowing K-3 students to attend, in person versus others?
Great question. Anybody? And you can either raise your hand or put it in the chat if you have knowledge of younger kiddos going back. Marianne, yeah, what a great point. The tide has changed from teachers are heroes to lazy and need to get back to work. Yeah, how quickly that changes. And okay, Delaware, K-3 are not required to wear a mask. Delaware, are you going to be in person with little ones? Katie, all grade schools in our county are going back full time. What, Katie, tell me where you are again. Remind me. Sissy, oh, hey Sissy, I didn't see you. Okay, Massachusetts wants to send little ones back. Okay, that's right, Katie, you're in Sheboygan. Louisiana, pre-K through third attending daily, pre-K through 2 no mandated masks. Okay. Jessica, it's up to each district. Jessica, where are you? In Delaware, okay. Very interesting. Adriana, in New Zealand, we were told that children are least impacted by COVID. That's why the ECEs opened first, right? And Adriana, how did that go once they opened? Can you, hold on, I'm gonna see if I can unmute you. Yep, go ahead.
Parents tended not to send their children to early childhood centres. So basically, our early childhood centres are now struggling to get children to attend, and a lot of parents have opted, because they're staying at home because of no jobs, they have decided to keep the children home rather than to send them. So early childhood teachers get less hours, a lot of closing. So we've got those sort of impacts. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And from a health perspective, when some of the kids did go back, was there increased transmission?
The thing is, in New Zealand, it's really different because there was the community transmission was really kept to a low level. Actually, I don't think there was community transmission when New Zealand decided to open up for schools. It was really, really low. So we had got on top of it because of our lockdown. So it's very different from where you guys sit, because you're so inconsistent and everyone's your community transmission is still very, very high. So we're different.
Yeah, you certainly are.
Yeah.
Thank you, though. And Peggy, I'm so glad you mentioned the surveys, because I want to share. So you'd done a parent survey. They wanted to be in person. The board said no. Oh, parents are planning a protest. Interesting. Yeah, I wonder. And so I think that's what happened. I can't remember what district it was in Wisconsin that had that. They had so much pressure from parents. They amended their original decision. So you remember a couple weeks ago we had Pam Black on here, and she had created the surveys. She was working on the surveys. So they're up now and they're available. I'm going to share my screen really quickly if I can find. There it is. I have too many tabs open. I think I have a problem. All right, so here's the blog that she did yesterday on the ACEs in Education site. Hopefully you all are members of this, because We post a lot of good stuff on here. So she did this blog post, which is great, and it's got some great links. So she also linked the surveys, which are on her website. They have elementary, middle, and high school students, parents and families, and staff. So they're free. We encourage you to use them. Share them with the admin that you know. They're a great resource. We also put them, so back on our ACEs in Education page, we have this ACEs Connection COVID-19 resources. So we also, because our blogs rotate so quickly, we put so much up, we knew these would kind of disappear eventually. So we embedded the surveys in our resources as well. So you should really go to the ACEs in Education COVID resource page, and there's a ton of good stuff in here. And we divided it up by collections from other groups, access like digital equity and access articles and resources, supports for parents, supports just for districts and schools, more admin stuff, resources for teachers, special ed, and youth mental health. And so as we find good collections from others, good articles, good resources, good tools, we collect them here. So make sure you make good use of this. And then we also have one for parents specific to COVID as well under here, Parenting with ACEs in a Pandemic. So lots of good resources. I couldn't remember if I'd shared those with you guys before. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Sissy, I don't know if you'd want to unmute yourself and talk about what you just shared.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I was just going to say we have a new flyer, Coping with COVID-19, coping with stress during COVID-19. And I put the link in the chat. It's general information. One side is really very general information that families and schools can use and share, but there's some specific resources just for California that won't be as relevant to everybody outside of California. But I just put it in the chat if anyone wants to check that out. Thank
you, Sis. And when I was talking about, well, I still have your attention. When I was talking about Robin, which you hosted so wonderfully, is there anything else that I didn't mention that you thought would be helpful for people to chew on from Robin's conversation?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Yeah, I think you did a really good job summarizing. I mean, the point about there not necessarily being school nurses in the building at all, or that there might be like parents and educational experts making decisions, but unless there's somebody from public health, you really want to make sure that there's a safe public health plan when you're thinking about if your kids are going back or not. So I thought that was also really helpful, is just checking how involved the Board of Health is and experts with a public health background. So I thought that was really good. And then somebody just posted in there the 6 W's. Did you mention those already, Lara?
I didn't.
So it was, let's see if we can remember them.
I know.
I might need your help, Adriana. Wear a mask, wash your hands, when called, pick up the phone. What were the other W's?
Watch your distance.
Yep, watch your distance. I can't remember, but I am doing yep.
Okay,
stay home and keep windows open. Yeah, oh my
God, that's it, windows.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. That's so great. And there will be a follow-up blog post with notes and resources that were shared. So that's coming too, and the 6 W's will be there because I feel like that's useful. But I think I think when I got off of that webinar, one of the things that I was thinking, I was both excited because as a parent, it kind of gave me more resources and things to think about, but it was also, I guess, angering and frustrating that there's not a lot of plans and that each county, school, district, state is figuring this out on its own.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that piece, I guess, I mean, I understood there wasn't a national plan, but in terms of Robin sharing that if your school doesn't have a plan yet, if it hasn't shared it with you, it's probably still in the works, and the school administrators and staff, everybody's still figuring this out right now. So I think that part was a little bit the scary part. But it was good to hear from her, and then just to really make sure there's safety measures in place, who will be watching the kids, who's doing contact tracing, our kids getting, and staff and students getting tested to make sure it's safe to be in school. You know, if we're doing that for athletes, shouldn't we be doing that for students and staff? Stuff like that.
Oh, right.
So I thought that was really important as well. Just who's doing the testing, tracing, and the contact. I know in Massachusetts, we just heard that schools aren't even tracking cases.
Right.
So just general information like that maybe on this call, where there's a lot of people who work in schools maybe already know, but as a parent, I wasn't aware of that. So just in terms of what we can insist on as parents needing to feel safe and comfortable for kids and staff. And also, how can we support staff? Because I know at our school, the administration has to come up with a plan, but that, you know, even just as being on part of the school committee, we don't necessarily know if teachers are in favor of it, if the staff feels comfortable coming back. So as parents, I would want to know, do teachers feel safe and comfortable? Does the staff feel comfortable coming back? Like, that all matters, and we're not necessarily where the parents are hearing from the administration, and maybe staff and teachers are as well, and we're not necessarily all together.
Yeah.
Know, understanding what everybody's concerns are. They might be incredibly overlapping.
Yes. Well, you should share Pam's surveys with your school folks.
I definitely will.
Maybe they can survey them, because I agree with you. I mean, I think it's a little bit, I worry less about the staff at my kid's school knowing that it's going to be virtual. Like, I don't stress about them as much. And I know that puts more stress on us. I have 2 kids that are going to be juniors. I work full-time from home.
Yeah.
And I mean, yes, I'm an educator, so I have skills, but I'm supposed to somehow, you know, homeschool my 2 kids that are doing stuff that I don't even remember how to do anymore. Like, I can't do trigonometry.
Yeah.
Them. You know, if they were little, I could do it all. But I was talking with someone else about this. You know, as a parent, one of my kids has significant mental health challenges and has a 1-to-1 at school, right? He has a very complex IEP. So of all parents, like, I need my kid to be in school more than most.
Yeah.
And, you know, we are left to, you know, on top of, you know, my working full-time from home, managing 2 high schoolers, you know, complex curriculums from home. I have a kid that has intense special needs that now we have to figure out how to support with, you know, and no in-home supports because of COVID either. So all the therapies that were coming into our house are no longer there either. So we're just left to figure it out by ourselves and hope he doesn't end up in the hospital, right? And yet with all of that, I still wouldn't put my kids in school, and I don't want anybody else's kids to be in school, you know? So I definitely empathize with, and, you know, someone else brought up, I think Robin was talking about this, you know, most of her parents are essential workers in the district where she works as a school nurse. So she knows that most of her students don't have parents who have the luxury of staying home and working, right? They have to be at work. So they're really, you know, there's so much complexity to all the decisions that we make, and really just need to support, and just like so much empathy for everybody having to make and struggle with the decisions that that we have. And yet safety, you know, Robin's message of like safety and science have to be at the forefront of our choices. So anyway, anybody else want to chime in before I put you into smaller groups? Adriana, I'm so glad you reminded me. I don't know why your statement reminded me of this, but again, this is another big thing coming up, especially here in California, where we have such disparity in incomes. Okay. Oh God, good. Hillary, you raised your hand. I'll call you in a second. The pods, that we have around Los Angeles, and I know up in Oakland, we have parents that have money that are putting ads out there to hire teachers at $100,000 a year to come in and teach the pods, their little like instructional pods. Teachers don't make that much, right? So, they're pooling their funds to create these learning pods, but that will just really exacerbate the inequities that we already have. Hillary.
One of the things I'm most worried about going back, and we're going back completely virtual this year, and what you said about your own kids is what made me think about it. We deal with a population that has a lot of challenges. And in many ways, we're in loco parentis when we're at school. And that's one of the things that it's so much easier to do when you're in the same room with the kid. We even have lunch in our rooms with all of our students. So there's a kind of, it's a casual, and what's going on, and you hear what they're saying, and you can jump in, and you can kind of, wrap your arms around what's going on in their life. I mean, I can teach them trigonometry on Zoom. I got that, but it's so hard for me to replicate the kind of things that come naturally when we're in class. And I would love to know anything that could help me do that, help me improve that Zoom communication, because many of my students are not even comfortable turning their video on.
Right. That's
So,
definitely the case here.
For me to interact with someone who's just like a letter on a screen, and it's a tough situation.
Yeah, well, this is a good group to ask. So if anybody has any suggestions, feel free to type it in. And Sissy, what did you write? Oh, right, that will be required of adults in close contact, the mask, the goggles, the gowns, a medical setting. Yeah, right. So, that interpreting that is going to be a challenge for some kids for sure. The institutionalization, she also brought up the windows, they were suggesting opening windows, and how many classrooms and schools have we been in that have 0 windows? They're like fortresses, right? I've been in so many brick buildings with either like windows like this that don't open, or no windows at all. So that was a interesting point, that the environment that we're in is not conducive to what we need, for sure. Okay, so with all of those things that we talked about, decisions, parents' needs, inequities that exist, local decision making, kind of what's going on with you, I'm going to put you in breakout for, let's see, 12:30, probably about 10 minutes. Please introduce yourselves first to each other, build community, and then use each other as a resource. Maybe, someone posed something that they're struggling with, or, something that really struck them in our conversation, and work it out, have a good discussion with each other. Jenna, can you make the breakouts?
Sure.
There's 30, now how about groups of 4? 4 to 5. And then we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. All right, people are coming back. I'd love to hear from any of you how your breakouts went, what you discussed, any insights. Janice, hold on, let me unmute you. Whoops, hold on. All right, Jenna, I'm not going to touch it. Can you help me?
Okay, I got it. We talked about, what our districts are currently doing, and also what, a little bit about the younger kids and what we thought about that, and what the plans were in each one of our scenarios with the younger children, and would it be a good thing or not? That's pretty much what we got to.
Was it helpful?
I think so, a little bit.
Okay, good. Good, because I usually have topics that are relevant to what's been going on recently. It's a never-ending source of news for us, but I also wanted to, this space is also a place where I hope that you guys can learn from each other and share in small groups. All right, Peggy. All right.
So we also discussed some resources. So part of the problem that happened in the spring is some teachers had more knowledge than others about, how to use some of the technology. And so as a district, they've started something called Mobile Mind. And the nice part about that training, I think it's through Google, but I'm not certain, but it does a lot of Google training, but it's mini snippets for staff. So it's 5-minute trainings instead of an hour long.
Huh.
And you can personalize the path based on what it is you want and need. And so say you want to learn more about Google Meet, you can take a series of classes that get you proficient in that.
Interesting.
So, and then there's another email that I'm getting on a regular basis, simpleK12.com, and it does a lot of Google training as well. Because, there are all these resources out there. Google Classroom is a great idea, but there's this window of it, and there's, oh my word, it does all of this. And so to be able to go in and learn some of those things so that you're not trying to make it up on the fly, but somebody says, oh no, do this and this and this, it helps.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been wondering about that. Just watching my kids' teachers and just thinking about, if I was in the classroom right now, needing to really, I'm sure a lot of teachers really need to get a lot of more training around that to do it well. For sure. For sure. Any other conversations that happened in the small groups? Yeah, my kids, their schools have done an amazing job using Google Classroom. And now you're making me curious, Peggy, like what else can it do? Because I've already loved just helping them in the spring and learn it myself as the parent teacher, right? I was like, wow, this is really, really great. Things have changed so much since I was in the classroom. And I use technology all the time, but not in that way. And like someone else introduced me to Padlet and another, like, what's it called? Jigsaw? I don't know. There was some like new learning platforms, and I was like, wow, these are super cool. And yeah, adding a whiteboard feature. That was cool. Seesaw? Yeah, I think it was Jigsaw. I used it someone used it in a conference for educators. So Padlet was the one, and then I'll have to remember, but it was very interesting. Seesaw. Yeah, so I'm sure there's a lot of tools out there. I wanted to share, so not next week, but on August 20th, I'm going to bring my good friends, Meaning Makers Collective, to be our special guests. I put their website in the chat, and I'm going to share my screen with you for a second. These are the lovely ladies of Meaning Makers Collective, and they specialize in educator wellness. That's their focus, and staff, not just teachers, but school staff wellness, and that they do a really amazing job. And they really have a strong focus on building collective wellness in a building and changing to a culture of care. I really adore them. I love them. They're so brilliant. And so they're going to come on the 20th and spend the hour with us talking about taking care of ourselves and building collective wellness structures in the buildings in which we work. So put that on your calendars, and I'll definitely write a blog about it. And like I said, Robin will be joining us in the near future as well to talk about health and school nurses and all of that. It's 12:47, so is there any other questions, comments, needs, desires before we sign off for the week? We can source from each other. Also, if you guys, another good point, and I'll ask this to the large group next time, if you have any recommendations for guests, is there anyone you'd like to hear from? I'm not shy about reaching out to people, and if I don't know someone, a lot of times people I know them. So if there's anyone you'd really love to hear from, please give me suggestions. Ooh, Sung-hee, there are many tools online for virtual circle meetings designed for healing. Interesting. Do you have any that you could recommend? Healing Circles Global, how to host a virtual circle. Wow, I'm excited to learn about that. All right, I'm gonna look into that. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and if you think of someone that you want me to invite after we get off, just send me an email. As usual, I'll put my email in here.
You know what might be nice if you could arrange this?
Yeah.
Laura, it might be nice to hear from one union representative about the teacher's perspective, like from the unions, and do they want to go back, and also like one school board perspective or parent perspective that's, you know, if we are parents too, that can color our, but you know, someone who's a parent who's not also a staff member, it might be nice to have like a little panel things to ask them about their perspectives.
I like that idea. Just taking notes here. Yeah, any other great suggestions? Yeah, I would say from what I understand about the unions currently, they're absolutely supporting teachers staying home. Yeah, they seem to be much on board with teacher safety, staff safety, in alignment with that. They seem, that's what I like in the national level. But yeah, Janice, I think you're right at the local level, you know, state unions are, can be very, like they fall within the two national unions, but they can, like their politics are different at the local levels. It's complex. Like the two national unions will have a line, a political line or a message, and then it kind of differs how that gets worked out at the local level depending on the politics in the local area and who the union reps are. And yeah, it's very complex. And yeah, school boards, I would be curious to know, I have not heard much from too many school boards either, although I know very complex at the local level. Oh, great suggestion, Sunyi. Okay. Helen, do you know her? Yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, that's fine. I'm good at cold calling. Right, Janice, good, right. So Adriana, here, each district has their own union that is an affiliate usually of one of the national unions, but they don't have to follow their line. Right, so they're affiliated with either the NEA or AFT. Those are our two national unions, American Federation of Teachers or the National Education Association. But at the local level, it really can be so based on personality, local politics, their relationship with the district. Some districts have great relationships with their unions. Some have terrible, adversarial relationships with their unions. When I was involved in designing the Kaiser Trauma-Informed Schools pilot, that was going to be put into 20 schools across the country, unions were a big part of that pilot design, purposefully. But when we picked our 20 pilot schools, one of the things that we looked for in readiness is a district that didn't have a very adversarial relationship with their union. So we wanted teacher voices to be represented. If we're going to make a whole school change to becoming a trauma-informed school, the union had to be part of the leadership team. But then for that very reason, at least in the pilot, we picked schools that had good relationships between their union and admin, because we were going to be asking them to work so closely together and making such a big change. We didn't want to start off with having to fight that fight too, if that makes sense. But they are crucial in my belief. They're really very important partners in any kind of big school change that we make. So that'd be great. Yeah, I'll look into that. Any other questions or suggestions of things you'd like to hear, who you'd like to hear from, topics? All right, well, with that, it's 12:55, so we can sign off for today. But like I said, there's my email. Any other ideas come up, send them to me, and I will look into it. But other than that, we will see you next Thursday, and on the 20th, meeting makers will be with us. And look out for the blogs for guests that are coming up. Thank you, Jenna. Oh, and Jenna did put in the link for Robin's interview on Tuesday with Sissy. She put that in the chat. And remember, you can save the chat by going to the three little dots in the chat, click on right click and save chat. And that'll save all of these links for you in a little file. Everybody got that? How to do that? Okay. All right, everyone. Well, we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining. Be well, take care of yourselves.